everyone, it's Raina. So this video is for those people who have their natal moon in their sixth house, obviously in your natal chart. And before I continue, I just want to give a shout out to the astrocodex.com and also cafeastrology.com, because I did glance through their different information. I have Astro Codex right in front of me, so that I can just, instead of taking notes, it's just easier for me just to base it off of what they say. And the thing that I want to also make note of is that it's really important to know what your moon sign is as well. And of course, I have no doubt that anybody who's listening to this already knows what their moon sign is. There would be no way you would know that your moon is in the sixth house, but you don't know what sign it's in. But some people don't know what house their moon is in, but they know what sign it's in. That's much more commonplace. So the moon is our emotional nature. I think most people understand that in terms of astrology. And it's also our instinctual nature. I think those two are really quite connected. I think that emotions are like instinctual responses. You know, they're kind of like things that we just naturally, reactions to life that are coming from a deeply ingrained place. Either something in our childhood that we just experienced over and over again that trigger us into certain feelings. It doesn't have to be bad, it can be good, but it does seem like we always tend to think of, when we think of emotions, we tend to think of the more challenging ones, but it doesn't have to be that way. And also past lives. I mean, I think that could totally be, there are some, phobias and things like that a person can't trace to their current life, and yet they exist. So the point being that being emotional, being instinctual, is something that you're not sitting there consciously plotting out. I mean, it just happens. So in the sixth house, we're talking about the area of your health, your work that you're doing. So the 10th house is your career, but the 6th house is the work itself. And it can just describe your attitude towards work. Your, if you have Saturn in the 6th house, you may have a good work ethic, but it almost might border on, a sense of duty, like you're duty bound. And so it's kind of like, to me, almost by rote, that somebody, they just get up and they go to work, and people think, wow, they're very committed, but they feel like they would feel guilty if they didn't do it. So it's kind of like one of those deals. And then if you have the moon in the 6th house, you may feel like this, somehow this emotional connection to work itself. And I feel that this can be a situation, and I didn't see it anywhere in here, but it stands to reason that this can mean that a person feels like they must work in order to feel good about themselves emotionally. Whereas if we were to look at the sun in this 6th house, that would be more of a, I don't want to say an ego thing, that they pride themselves on work like as a bad thing, because pride is not bad and it's not narcissistic. It's a healthy ego. It's a healthy pride. Pride meaning not arrogance, but like, I want to be productive. I want to be of service. And that's how I view the sun there. With the moon, it's more something that to me could even be coming from a conditioned response, like they are told that this is, you have to work or else you're lazy, you're this, you're that, something bad. So they're doing it for that reason, but it's not necessarily something that is coming from So it's almost like, I'm not saying it's like fear-based or anything, but it could be coming from somebody else's conditioning. Maybe the mother, since the mother is the moon, by the way. So look to whatever your moon sign is, and you will tend to see characteristics of your mother. And then in the sixth house, it can even be that as well, like you were kind of like, I don't want to say brainwashed, but conditioned to believe certain things about life. And one of them is, you have to work. Work is part of how life is. I mean, that's just what you do. And so, like I said, I'm getting some of my information from Codex, and I'm just kind of like adding to it with my own insights. But one of the things that they talk about here is the idea of changes in the workplace. Okay. So now they say here that this could bring about a person with a workaholic nature. And I find that very interesting because it doesn't necessarily resonate with me that that would be the case. I would say more likely that the person's emotions are engaged in what they do. And if they're not, like if you're working someplace and you don't like what you do, I could see you not, kind of mailing it in. So I don't see somebody automatically being a workaholic because they have the moon in the sixth house. I don't see the logic of that. And even with the daily routine, because the moon is changeable, I could see somebody changing their routine as well. But it could, I do believe that this is the type of person who uses routines or their daily habits as a way to feel safe in the world. I do think that's a great probability. So it's kind of fun to, kind of riff off of, what the website definition is, because I think that, sometimes when I read these explanations, I don't necessarily agree with them, and sometimes it's because if I have that placement, I don't think that that's true for me, but it just doesn't logically, make sense to me. And then sometimes they seem incomplete, so I just kind of fill in the blanks based on what I think might be appropriate, and, take it for what it's worth. But because the moon represents food and preparing food, there's a probability that somebody will work with food. Now, cooking is the no-brainer, but we could be talking about working in a restaurant. We could talk about being a dietitian. Now, I will say that Virgo rules the sixth house, and I have always felt that, I might have even read that vegetarianism was associated with Virgo. But herbalism, I really feel like this is natural health, and that if somebody works with food, and if they have the moon in Virgo in the sixth, forget about it. They probably really are like that. But that they will probably try to work someplace where there's an emphasis on health, where it's not just about working in a fast food joint, for instance. That might not work very well for somebody with the moon in the sixth house. Now, now they say here, now this is very interesting because I'm imagining that Astro Codex is a very contemporary site. But they say here that in a woman's chart, this could also signify doing work of a domestic nature, like, cleaning houses. But the thing is, they said being a housewife. And I have noticed that a lot of younger women these days seem to be stay-at-home mothers. But some of, I was told that a lot of them have their own home businesses. So it's not like they're just, and I'm putting that in quotes, a mother. I think being a mother is, or being a stay-at-home parent is a very demanding and important job in and of itself. But I'm saying that I was told that many of them have home businesses. But even regardless if they do or not, I find it interesting that they are being gender specific here because, a male who has their moon in the sixth house, maybe they would be a more likely candidate to be a Mr. Mom, or, that's kind of insulting to a stay-at-home dad. You don't have to be a mom to be a dad. You can nurture children as a father. And I've seen, especially a lot of younger fathers these days seem to be very into that. Another thing that they say here is that people with this placement usually love cleaning and don't, think that it's a drag to clean. Okay, well, if you disagree with that, please write it below. I'm just telling you, I'm not saying this, they're saying this. And basically, a lot of these things that I'm saying, it's like I'm getting right from here. In terms of the anatomy, there could be a weakness with stomach health. So, in other words, digestive issues. And I would say, going along on that, certain line of thought, is that if you have the moon in the sixth house, you may even experiment with alternative diets trying to remedy this situation. So I could totally see somebody becoming a raw vegan thinking that they could, get rid of, being a fruitarian or something like that, feeling like they have a delicate system. And yet, this is very interesting because I also feel like, they talk here about hypochondria, and they even mention something about the phases of the moon and about their, your emotional nature, because again, the moon is your emotional nature. But I'm trying to figure out why they're talking about this in the sixth house. I have a feeling it's because it's like if there's a full moon, the sun is opposing it from the 12th house, and that's the house of mental health. The sixth house is a house of physical health. So that's the only thing I can think of offhand why they would be, talking about the person's mood changes. And if you notice it and you can trace it to the moon, you can trace it to the phases of the moon, then that might be helpful for you in advance, because they talk about it in those terms. But one thing that they say here is that this kind of person, because of the digestive system, can, that might be a weakness and a problem within the person. But they say here that a person's digestive system is linked to emotions anyway, and so that's why this would be particularly important. I think you can say that about any health issue, is that it's not, I don't believe that health is just with our flesh bodies, that there is an energetic component always at play here. And so for somebody who has the moon in the sixth house, it seems like it would be a logical thing for you to get a handle on your emotions. If you feel like you're somebody, and especially I would say if you are a water sign and maybe a fire sign, because these tend to be the more emotional signs. And, number one would be the water signs. So Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. But also the fire signs, Aries, Leo, Sag. Those signs may tend to get more riled up about things, very fiery. But that can, affect digestion as well. But the water signs especially, because they just happen to, have a tendency to take things to heart, and just be very sensitive in general. And psychically, sensitive means, also empathic and absorbing other people's emotions too. But in any case, I feel like in addition to that, people who are earth and air signs, you guys may not express your emotions very readily because you tend to be more detached, but that doesn't mean that you don't have emotions. So that's an important thing of to make sure that you're not sublimating your emotions and that they're coming out in your body as symptoms. And also from the hypochondriac angle, I think also, especially with people who are maybe the earth and the air signs, that's the only time that you feel safe kind of expressing that something has gone awry is to have a health condition. And this is something that has to be acknowledged as well, is if you're angry, some of the emotions that are particularly distressing, like anger, especially if you don't think that you can remedy it because the other person isn't willing to deal with it, to really like get a handle on emotions and a way to discharge challenging emotions in a healthy way, including, I think one of the biggest pieces to this is being able to tell others around you that you are angry with them. That is such a big thing. Some people, when they grow up with volatile parents, they can have a very difficult time as adults, dealing with anger because they fear that other person's reaction, because when they were kids, their parents were rageaholics. And it totally makes sense to me that people, have this issue in life and this fear about doing that. But you have to. You don't have a choice. If you swallow your feelings, they could come out in digestive issues very easily, especially people like you, but anybody, anyone could have this. So that's an interesting thing. And, with hypochondria, I never know how to say hypochondriacism. For people who are hypochondriacs, this can be a way to elicit sympathy from others so that they leave you alone. So if you feel like bullied by somebody or like you're always being criticized, what better way to shut people up than by saying, I have this, I have that, when you don't really know for sure. You're just trying to, and you're not doing this deliberately to mislead people, just because you literally, you might actually feel those symptoms, but it's always in connection with your emotional state. So the other thing too, it's funny because I had Cafe Astrology open, and I noticed they were saying something almost similar to, about gaining sympathy for exaggerating health and stuff. And that was exactly what I was trying to communicate. But I wasn't even reading that consciously. It just happened to be the same thing. So now here's another thing that I would kind of take a little bit of exception to on Astro Codex. They said that this position may have a tendency to be used by coworkers, because the sixth house can be your coworkers and the relationships with them. And they say this is due to you being very hardworking and, other people just taking advantage of that fact and doing that to you. I don't necessarily believe that. Yes, of course, the moon in the sixth may have a sympathetic attitude towards coworkers. And I feel like what's more likely with you and coworkers is that you are that you bond with people emotionally, and so it's very important for you to be in a workplace where you are basically getting along with people. I think it would be very distressing for you if you had kind of a lot of conflicts with your coworkers. And some people have really good experiences with coworkers. For instance, if you have not only your moon, but if Venus in the sixth house can indicate having a harmonious workplace, and you just naturally attract that. So that kind of thing is very interesting as well. I would say that the person with the moon in the sixth house would be a great healer, and I haven't seen one thing about that. I mean, they only talk about nutrition and stuff, but they don't even talk about the type of work that you might do. I really think all they said was about food and cleaning. I mean, I think that being a healer in general, and the more if your moon, or if you have the sun in Aquarius or Pisces, maybe Scorpio or something like that, then that might really be front and center in terms of importance for you in this area. Okay, that's what I have for you. So I really have a lot of fun doing these, and I hope it shows. If you would like me to do this for you personally, when I do my natal chart interpretations, this is what I love to do, to kind of go into what the person may be like based on their astrological placements, and also looking at the year ahead. That's also a part of it. So please visit me at rainamoonastrology.com. The link to my online store is below. Take care. Bye.